The year 2002 etched itself into the collective memory of Lexington, Kentucky, with a chilling disappearance that would haunt the community for 2 long decades. It was the vanishing act of Jason Lee, a name that would become synonymous with enduring mystery and a family's relentless search for truth. Jason wasn't just a face in the crowd. He was a beacon of youthful promise, an athlete whose dreams stretched far beyond the quiet streets of his hometown. His absence would tear a hole in the fabric of Lexington, a wound that festered with each passing year, refusing to heal until answers, however painful, finally emerged. This isn't just a story about a missing person, it's about the resilience of a family, the unwavering dedication of a community, and the slow grind of justice that persevered against all odds. Jason Lee, at just 16 years old, embodied the vibrant spirit of adolescence. He was a junior at Bryan Station High School, known not only for his infectious grin but also for his formidable talent on the football field. A star running back, his future seemed bright, paved with potential scholarships and the roar of Friday night lights. Beyond the gridiron, Jason was a beloved son, a protective older brother, and a loyal friend. His family, the Lees, lived a modest, close-knit life in a quiet Lexington neighborhood, their days punctuated by school, church, and Jason's demanding practice schedule. His parents, Evelyn and Robert, had instilled in him a strong work ethic and a deep respect for his community. Jason was a good kid, the kind of teenager every parent hoped for, responsible and driven, with a clear vision for his future that revolved around college and, perhaps, even a professional sports career. The community adored him, watching his progress with a collective sense of pride and anticipation. The fateful day dawned like any other Tuesday in October. Crisp autumn air, a hint of wood smoke on the breeze, the typical hustle and bustle of a school morning. Jason followed his usual routine, a pattern ingrained in him from years of structured athletic life. He ate breakfast, grabbed his well-worn duffel bag packed with his practice gear, exchanged a quick, "love you," with his mom, and headed out the door. The plan was simple: school, then football practice, then home for dinner and homework. It was a rhythm he had followed countless times, a predictable sequence that offered comfort in its familiarity. There were no ominous clouds on the horizon, no strange encounters, no foreboding whispers. Just the ordinary ebb and flow of a teenager's day, moving towards the familiar ritual of practice. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the Lee family home, an unease began to settle in. Dinner was ready, but Jason wasn't. 5 minutes turned into 10, then 20. Evelyn, initially brushing it off as practice running late, began to feel a prickle of worry. Jason was always punctual, especially when food was involved. Robert, usually calm and steady, felt a knot tighten in his stomach. A call to the school confirmed practice had ended hours ago. His coach hadn't seen him leave. A quick round of calls to his friends yielded no answers. None of them had seen Jason after practice either. The initial normalcy of the day had shattered, replaced by a rapidly escalating sense of dread that clawed at their throats. The silence in the house became deafening, each passing second amplifying their terror. Jason Lee, their star athlete, their beloved son, had vanished. The quiet hum of their lives was irrevocably broken, replaced by the chilling echo of an unanswered question: where was Jason? If you want to delve deeper into more chilling true crime stories and follow the relentless pursuit of justice, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring these important narratives to light. The chilling echo of an unanswered question, "Where was Jason?" reverberated through the Lee household, transforming their comfortable home into a crucible of panic. The agonizing hours that followed blurred into a nightmarish montage for Evelyn and Robert. Every creak of the house, every distant car sound brought a fresh surge of false hope, only to be dashed by the persistent silence. As the clock hands relentlessly pushed past midnight, the grim reality solidified. Jason wasn't just late, he was truly, terrifyingly missing. With trembling hands, Robert made the call to the Lexington Police Department, each spoken word a confirmation of their worst fears. The dispatcher's calm, procedural questions felt like a cruel contrast to the chaos erupting within their souls. An officer arrived, his presence a stark reminder of the unprecedented crisis that had engulfed their family. Law enforcement's initial response unfolded with a mixture of urgency and standard protocol. The first few hours were critical, focused on gathering immediate information and establishing a timeline. Officers interviewed Evelyn and Robert, meticulously cataloging Jason's habits, his friends, his enemies, though the Lees insisted Jason had none, and any recent changes in his behavior. They scoured the family home, then the school, and the surrounding areas of the football practice field. Coaches and teammates were questioned, each one echoing the same bewilderment. Jason had been there, then he simply wasn't. There were no signs of a struggle, no discarded belongings, nothing to indicate foul play, yet also nothing to explain his absence. The initial searches extended into the wooded areas bordering the school grounds, flashlight beams cutting through the pre-dawn darkness, illuminating nothing but fallen leaves and shadows. The air crackled with a desperate energy, a growing frustration as lead after lead proved fruitless. As the news of Jason's disappearance spread, the Lexington community mobilized with an astonishing outpouring of support. It was a testament to the kind of boy Jason was and the respect the Lee family commanded. Neighbors, fellow churchgoers, parents of Jason's teammates, and even strangers began to rally. Within 24 hours, makeshift command centers sprang up in community halls, overflowing with volunteers. Flyers bearing Jason's smiling face, a photograph taken before a game, full of youthful exuberance, were printed by the thousands and plastered on every lamppost, storefront, and community board. Search parties, organized by seasoned community leaders and fueled by desperate hope, fanned out across the city and beyond, meticulously combing parks, abandoned buildings, and remote tracts. Food donations poured into the Lee home, a silent, comforting testament to the solidarity surrounding them, even as the grief remained a solitary burden. Local media outlets, initially hesitant, quickly recognized the gravity of the situation. The story of the promising teen athlete who vanished without a trace became front-page news and the lead segment on evening broadcasts. News vans descended upon the Lee residence, their satellite dishes pointing skyward like silent prayers. Reporters interviewed tearful friends, stoic coaches, and the increasingly distraught Lee family, amplifying their pleas for information. Jason's image became ubiquitous, his story a daily update, captivating the hearts and minds of Kentuckians far and wide. The media coverage, while intrusive, served as a vital tool, keeping Jason's name and face in the public consciousness, desperate for any tip, any sighting, that could lead to his safe return. Yet, despite the overwhelming community effort and the relentless media spotlight, the days bled into weeks with agonizing slowness, bringing no real answers. There were no ransom demands, no cryptic notes, no credible sightings. The initial urgency of the investigation began to falter as the well of potential leads ran dry. The police had interviewed hundreds, followed up on every anonymous call, but each path led to a dead end. The frustration mounted not just for law enforcement, but for the family, whose hope began to wane under the crushing weight of unanswered questions. What happened to Jason? Who would want to harm such a vibrant, well-loved young man? The silence was deafening, the void he left, ever expanding, and the growing sense of helplessness was a torment worse than any physical pain. The silence was deafening, the void he left, ever expanding, and the growing sense of helplessness was a torment worse than any physical pain. As weeks turned into months, the initial intense search efforts inevitably began to diminish. The relentless, high-energy operations of those first crucial days and weeks faded into a more structured, yet far less visible, police investigation. Tip lines grew quiet, volunteers returned to their daily lives, and the ubiquitous flyers, once bright with hope, now curled and faded on telephone poles, silent monuments to a fading public memory. Jason Lee's case, once a raging fire of community concern and media attention, slowly but inexorably transitioned from an active search to the chilling designation, a cold case. This shift, while understandable from a resource management perspective for law enforcement, was a fresh wound for the Lees, an official acknowledgement that their son's disappearance was now part of a backlog of unsolved mysteries, awaiting a breakthrough that might never come. The emotional toll on the Lee family was immeasurable, a pervasive, suffocating grief that eclipsed every aspect of their lives. Evelyn and Robert existed in a perpetual state of limbo, suspended between hope and despair. Every morning brought the agonizing realization that Jason was still gone, every night a haunting emptiness where his laughter used to be. The uncertainty gnawed at them, far worse than any confirmed tragedy. Was he alive? Was he suffering? Had he been taken against his will? The absence of answers was a daily torture, fracturing their peace and casting a long, dark shadow over their once happy home. His siblings, too young to fully comprehend the enormity of the situation, grappled with their own silent sorrow, missing their big brother, bewildered by his sudden, inexplicable vanishing. Holidays became agonizing reminders of his absence, birthdays were celebrated with a hollow ache, and family gatherings were perpetually incomplete. Life continued around them, but the Lees felt permanently out of sync, living in a world that had moved on while theirs remained frozen on that fateful October day. Despite the reduction in official search activity and the waning of broad public attention, the Lee family and a dedicated core of community members refused to let Jason's memory fade. Evelyn became a tireless advocate, her quiet determination hardening into an unyielding resolve. She poured her energy into keeping Jason's story alive, attending cold case conferences, speaking to anyone who would listen, and maintaining a website dedicated to her son. These weren't grand public spectacles, often they were quiet, personal acts of remembrance and persistent inquiry. Robert, a man of fewer words, found his own way to cope, meticulously reviewing old case files, endlessly replaying the events of that day, searching for the overlooked detail, the forgotten clue. They worked with compassionate detectives who, even as other cases piled up, periodically revisited Jason's file, driven by their own sense of duty and the Lees' unwavering hope. They formed a small, informal network, always pushing, always asking, always reminding the world that Jason Lee was still missing. As the years passed, technology began to offer new avenues for connection and remembrance. The nascent power of the Internet, which was just beginning to permeate everyday life in 2002, evolved into the dominant force of social media. The Lee family, with the help of supporters, embraced these new platforms. Facebook groups dedicated to Jason's disappearance emerged, digitally connecting people who remembered his story, sharing old news articles, and providing a space for collective remembrance. These online communities, while sometimes attracting baseless speculation, also served as vital platforms for disseminating new information, keeping the case relevant, and ensuring that Jason's face, etched in the minds of thousands, continued to surface in the digital realm. It was a testament to the enduring power of community, now amplified by the reach of the Internet, ensuring that Jason Lee was never truly forgotten. Periodically, a flicker of hope would ignite, only to be cruelly extinguished. A grainy photograph from a distant city might vaguely resemble Jason, sparking a frantic flurry of calls and investigations, only to prove to be someone else entirely. An anonymous tip would promise a breakthrough, often leading investigators down a rabbit hole of misinformation or malicious pranks. Each renewed hope, each false lead, was a fresh wave of agony for the Lees. It was a cycle of emotional whiplash, lifting them momentarily from the depths of despair, only to plunge them back down with even greater force. These periodic surges of activity, however, served a purpose. They reminded law enforcement, the media, and the public that Jason Lee was still missing, his story still incomplete, a haunting question mark in the heart of Kentucky. 20 years would pass in this agonizing cadence, each year adding another layer of dust to a case that refused to settle, a mystery demanding an answer. 20 years passed in this agonizing cadence, each year adding another layer of dust to a case that refused to settle, a mystery demanding an answer. The calendar pages turned with cruel indifference, marking solemn anniversaries of Jason's disappearance. The 1-year mark, the 5-year, the 10-year, and eventually, the harrowing passage to 2 decades. Each milestone was less a celebration and more a painful reminder of the unanswered questions, the empty chair at the dinner table, the life unlived. For the Lee family, these anniversaries were not just dates on a calendar. They were open wounds, perpetually bleeding, refusing to scab over. They watched Jason's friends grow up, graduate, marry, and start families, knowing their own son had been denied the chance to experience any of those milestones. The community, while moving forward, never truly forgot, and local news outlets would often revisit the story, a somber footnote in the vibrant life of Lexington, Kentucky. Yet, as time marched on, so did progress. The field of forensic science, in particular, underwent a revolutionary transformation. In 2002, DNA profiling was advanced, but its capabilities were still nascent compared to what would emerge in the following decades. Genetic genealogy, once a niche academic pursuit, blossomed into a powerful investigative tool, capable of linking crime scene evidence to distant relatives through public databases, thereby pointing investigators toward unknown perpetrators. Digital forensics, initially focused on basic computer data recovery, expanded exponentially, capable of extracting information from an ever-growing array of electronic devices. These technological advancements, coupled with refined investigative techniques, breathed new life into the concept of cold case units, offering hope that even the most stubborn mysteries could eventually yield their secrets. Throughout these 2 decades, a small, dedicated cadre of investigators within the Lexington Police Department never truly closed Jason's file. They were the unsung heroes, the detectives who carried the weight of these unsolved cases with a quiet tenacity. For them, Jason Lee wasn't just a case number. He was a face, a family's shattered hope, a nagging injustice. Periodically, one of them, perhaps Detective Miller, who had been on the force when Jason vanished and felt a personal stake in the case, would pull the thick, dusty folder from the archives. They would pore over the original police reports, witness statements, and forensic analyses, looking for a fresh angle, a overlooked detail, a new interpretation that a fresh pair of eyes or a new technique might reveal. They understood that cold cases weren't solved by magic, but by relentless, methodical work and an unwavering belief that every victim deserved justice. The breakthrough, when it finally arrived, was not a sudden explosion of information but a slow, deliberate accretion of details. It came almost exactly 18 years after Jason disappeared, a new piece of information emerging from an unexpected source. It wasn't a deathbed confession, nor a conscience-stricken individual haunted by guilt. Instead, it was a re-examination of a seemingly insignificant detail from the very first days of the investigation. A neighbor, who had initially been questioned and dismissed, had mentioned seeing an unfamiliar pickup truck parked a few blocks from the school on the day Jason vanished. At the time, the lead seemed too vague, too common to pursue extensively. But with the passage of time and the development of new data analysis tools, a cold case detective, utilizing an updated system for cross-referencing vehicle registrations and local incidents, revisited this detail. This seemingly innocuous detail, the unfamiliar pickup truck, became the aha moment. What had been a vague sighting in 2002 was now cross-referenced against a database of minor infractions and vehicle ownership changes in the Lexington area from that period. The detective discovered that a vehicle matching the description of the neighbor's sighting was involved in a minor traffic accident a week after Jason's disappearance, just a few miles from the school. The driver of that truck, a man named Marcus Thorne, had been issued a ticket. Thorne had no apparent connection to Jason Lee, no ties to the school, and no previous criminal record that would have flagged him in the initial investigation. But a deeper dive into Thorne's background, now made easier by interconnected databases, revealed something chilling. He had moved abruptly out of state just months after the accident, selling his truck for cash. This sudden relocation, combined with his proximity to the school on the day Jason vanished, transformed a dismissed detail into the first, chilling thread of a new, promising lead. This sudden relocation, combined with his proximity to the school on the day Jason vanished, transformed a dismissed detail into the first, chilling thread of a new, promising lead. The cold case detective, a seasoned veteran named Detective Harding, now had a name to focus on: Marcus Thorne. Thorne wasn't a name that had ever surfaced in the original investigation, nor did he appear in any of the countless witness statements or community tip lines. This was entirely new territory, a path forged by meticulous data analysis, and the sheer tenacity of investigators who refused to let Jason be forgotten. Harding dedicated himself to building a comprehensive profile of Thorne, painstakingly piecing together fragments of his life from public records, old social media accounts, and archived news clippings. This wasn't about casting blame prematurely, it was about following the evidence, no matter where it led. Marcus Thorne, it turned out, was a phantom in the narrative of Jason Lee's disappearance. In 2002, he was 28 years old, a transient worker who had briefly lived in Lexington, taking on various odd jobs. He had no known connection to Bryan Station High School or the Lee family. He had no children, no consistent romantic relationships, and a history of moving frequently between states, never staying in one place for more than a few years. His record was clean, save for a few minor traffic violations, which perhaps explained why he hadn't been flagged during the initial, broader sweeps for suspects with criminal histories. There was nothing in his background that screamed murderer. Yet his sudden departure from Lexington shortly after Jason's disappearance, combined with the proximity of his vehicle to the school, now felt profoundly suspicious. It was a pattern of behavior that indicated evasion, a deliberate attempt to disappear from the local radar. He was, in essence, the perfect ghost, a man who could easily blend into the background and then vanish. The investigation into Marcus Thorne became a masterclass in covert operations. Detective Harding and his small team knew they couldn't alert Thorne, who had since settled in a small, remote town in rural Idaho, living a seemingly unremarkable life, now in his late 40s. The goal was to build an ironclad case before ever making contact. This involved extensive surveillance, not just of Thorne himself, but of his associates, his daily routines, and any interactions that might reveal a deeper secret. They meticulously reviewed his past, cross-referencing every detail with the existing evidence from Jason's original case file. Forensic specialists were brought in to re-examine the few pieces of physical evidence preserved from 2002, looking for DNA or trace evidence that could be linked to Thorne, using technologies unavailable 2 decades prior. Every phone call, every piece of mail, every movement was tracked and logged, creating a detailed mosaic of his life after Lexington. The team operated in the shadows, silent and unseen, slowly tightening the net around their unsuspecting target. As the covert investigation progressed, a clear strategy for interrogating Thorne began to form. The detectives understood that after 2 decades, memory fades, and outright confessions are rare. Their approach would be psychological, designed to exploit any cracks in Thorne's composure, any lingering guilt, or perhaps a hidden arrogance. They planned to present him with an overwhelming amount of circumstantial evidence, carefully curated to make him believe they knew far more than they actually did. The interrogation would be conducted on his home turf, far from Lexington, minimizing his ability to prepare or consult legal counsel without drawing suspicion. The aim was to create an environment of controlled pressure, slowly escalating the intensity until Thorne felt cornered, his carefully constructed alibis from 2 decades ago crumbling under the weight of meticulously gathered details and technological advancements he likely never anticipated. The emotional and psychological pressure on Marcus Thorne began to mount almost imperceptibly at first. Discreet inquiries in his new community about his past, supposedly for a background check, for a non-existent job, created a subtle ripple of unease. He started noticing unfamiliar cars, seemingly parked coincidentally, near his home or workplace. Small, almost imperceptible signs that his anonymity was eroding. Then came the official approach, 2 stern-faced detectives from Kentucky, appearing unannounced at his front door, requesting a voluntary interview regarding a cold case from Lexington. The carefully chosen words, the calm demeanor, belied the immense weight of the decades-long investigation behind them. Thorne, initially dismissive, quickly realized this was no ordinary inquiry. The detectives spoke with an unnerving precision, referencing details only someone intimately familiar with the case, or worse, with his own past, could know. His casual denials began to falter, replaced by a growing sense of dread. The comfortable facade of his new life in Idaho was slowly but surely cracking under the relentless, calculated pressure of justice finally closing in. The comfortable facade of his new life in Idaho was slowly but surely cracking under the relentless, calculated pressure of justice finally closing in. Marcus Thorne, visibly agitated, initially clung to his denials, feigning ignorance about Jason Lee and the events of that October day in 2002. He insisted he barely remembered living in Lexington, painting himself as a drifter with no ties, certainly no involvement in anything so heinous. But Detective Harding and his partner were prepared. They didn't come to Idaho with vague suspicions. They arrived with a meticulously built case, a tapestry woven from 2 decades of fragments. They presented him with a picture of his old pickup truck, the one he claimed to have sold for cash, now forensically confirmed to be the one seen near the school. They had records of his brief employment near Bryan Station High School, placing him within a few miles of Jason's last known location. They even had a statement from an old acquaintance who remembered Thorne discussing a minor altercation with a smart-mouthed kid who wouldn't get out of his way on a public path. The breakthrough came not in a dramatic confession, but in a gradual, reluctant unraveling. As the detectives systematically laid out each piece of evidence, Thorne's composure fractured. The calm, almost detached demeanor he had adopted began to crumble, replaced by nervous fidgeting, darting eyes, and an increasing tone of desperation. Finally, after hours of psychological pressure, Thorne snapped. The dam broke. He didn't confess to murder in a single, sweeping statement, but rather to a furious, impulsive act. He admitted to seeing Jason walking home from practice, headphones on, oblivious to his surroundings. Thorne, driving his old pickup, had apparently been in a foul mood, already feeling resentful and marginalized. He claimed Jason had been disrespectful, not moving quickly enough off the path he was driving on, leading to a heated exchange. Words escalated, and in a fit of rage Thorne struck Jason. He hadn't intended to kill him, he claimed, but the blow was fatal. Panicked, and realizing the immense trouble he was in, he made the unthinkable decision to conceal the body, driving Jason's lifeless form to a remote, overgrown area outside of Lexington, burying him in a shallow grave he dug in the dark of night. The revelation hit the detectives like a physical blow. 20 years of speculation, theories, and agonizing uncertainty were suddenly replaced by a chilling account of a senseless act of violence. Thorne provided directions, vague at first, then more specific as the weight of his admission seemed to lighten a burden he had carried for 2 decades. Immediately, a search team was dispatched to the precise coordinates Thorne indicated. It was a dense, wooded area, largely undeveloped, just as Thorne described. After a painstaking search, working through thick undergrowth and challenging terrain, the recovery team made the heartbreaking discovery. Buried shallowly, just as Thorne had confessed, were the remains of Jason Lee. The identification was swift, confirmed through dental records provided by the Lee family during the initial investigation. After 7,300 days, Jason was finally found. His parents, informed by Detective Harding, experienced a wave of conflicting emotions, profound sorrow at the confirmation of their deepest fear, mixed with an almost unbearable sense of relief that their son's final resting place was no longer a mystery. The motive, when fully extracted from Thorne's rambling confession, was shockingly mundane, yet devastating in its consequences. It wasn't rivalry, revenge, or a planned abduction. It was a petty argument, an explosive burst of anger from a deeply insecure and volatile man, exacerbated by a perceived slight from a confident, athletic teenager simply walking home. Thorne confessed to acting alone, his fear and panic driving his actions, not premeditation. He had been struggling with unemployment, feeling overlooked, and Jason's youthful vibrancy became an unwitting target for his pent-up frustration. It was a tragic, impulsive act that spiraled into a 2-decade-long cover-up, costing Jason his future and plunging the Lee family into an abyss of grief. The arrest of Marcus Thorne was swift and largely anticlimactic, occurring quietly in his Idaho home. The moment he was handcuffed, however, sent shockwaves across Lexington. News agencies, alerted by official police statements, quickly broke the story. Jason Lee's killer had been identified and apprehended. The community, which had carried the burden of this unsolved mystery for so long, reacted with a complex mix of emotions. There was an immense sense of relief that the truth had finally emerged, that Jason's family would have answers. But this relief was deeply intertwined with anger at the senselessness of the crime and sorrow for the loss of a life so brutally cut short. There was also a collective sigh of vindication for the cold case detectives and the Lee family, whose unwavering persistence had ultimately led to this moment. Tributes to Jason, both old and new, flooded social media, a reminder of the bright future he had been denied, and the justice that, though long delayed, was finally coming into view. Tributes to Jason, both old and new, flooded social media, a reminder of the bright future he had been denied, and the justice that, though long delayed, was finally coming into view. With Marcus Thorne in custody, the legal process commenced, slowly but inexorably grinding towards a resolution for the 2-decades-old cold case. He was formally charged with murder and concealment of a human body, and extradited back to Kentucky to face justice in the jurisdiction where his heinous act had occurred. The initial court appearances were brief, procedural affairs, but they marked the official transition from a cold case investigation to a criminal prosecution, a significant milestone for the Lee family who had waited so long for this day. The prosecution team, led by a dedicated district attorney, meticulously built their case, drawing upon Detective Harding's comprehensive investigation and Thorne's own admissions. The trial itself unfolded over several tense weeks, captivating not just Lexington, but the nation. The courtroom became a crucible where 2 decades of pain and anticipation collided with the stark realities of legal procedure. The prosecution presented an overwhelming array of evidence, Thorne's detailed confession, corroborated by the meticulous re-examination of the 2002 physical evidence, including trace elements found in his old pickup truck that matched the soil composition of the burial site. Expert witnesses testified about the advancements in forensic science, explaining how DNA analysis, once limited, had now confirmed Jason's identity beyond any doubt. The neighbor's initial sighting of the unfamiliar truck, dismissed as insignificant 20 years prior, was now a crucial piece of the puzzle, placed into context by Thorne's own movements. The defense, largely relying on attempting to discredit Thorne's confession as coerced and highlighting the lack of direct eyewitnesses to the act itself, struggled against the weight of the circumstantial and confessional evidence. Perhaps the most poignant and powerful moments of the trial came during the victim impact statements. Evelyn Lee, her voice trembling but resolute, stood before the court and described the 20 years of agony, the sleepless nights, the empty seat at holiday dinners, the perpetual ache of not knowing. She spoke of Jason's dreams, his infectious laughter, the man he never got to become. Robert Lee, a man of quiet strength, spoke of the profound injustice, the way his son's disappearance had hollowed out a part of their family that could never be refilled. Jason's younger siblings, now adults, shared their own stories of growing up without their protective older brother, forever shadowed by his absence. Their words, raw with grief and an enduring love, painted a vivid picture of the devastation Thorne had wrought, moving many in the courtroom to tears and underscoring the true cost of his impulsive act. After days of intense deliberation, the jury returned their verdict. The foreman's voice, clear and unwavering, pronounced Marcus Thorne guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder. A collective gasp, followed by a wave of emotion, swept through the courtroom. For the Lee family, sitting in the front row, it was a moment of profound, albeit bittersweet, vindication. Tears streamed down Evelyn's face, not of sorrow, but of an overwhelming rush of relief and, finally, a sense of justice. The legal battle was over, the truth irrevocably established. Thorne, impassive for much of the trial, showed no discernible reaction as his fate was sealed, a figure of detached indifference mirroring the callousness of his crime. The verdict resonated deeply throughout Lexington, bringing a long-awaited sense of closure to a community that had collectively mourned Jason for 2 decades. The sentencing phase followed weeks later. The judge, acknowledging the premeditated nature of the concealment and the profound impact on the Lee family, delivered a stern rebuke to Thorne. He emphasized the 2 decades of suffering caused by Thorne's cowardly act and subsequent cover-up. Marcus Thorne was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would spend the remainder of his days behind bars, paying the ultimate price for his crime. The consequence faced by the perpetrator was absolute, a final judicial pronouncement that brought an official end to the criminal proceedings, and for the Lee family, a hard-won measure of peace after years of unimaginable anguish. The justice system, though slow, had finally delivered. The justice system, though slow, had finally delivered. For the Lee family, the verdict and subsequent sentencing of Marcus Thorne brought a unique, bittersweet form of resolution. It was a moment etched with profound sorrow, for no verdict could ever bring Jason back, nor erase the 2 decades of agonizing uncertainty. Yet there was also an undeniable, palpable sense of relief. They finally knew what happened to their beloved son. The torment of the unknown had ended, replaced by a clarity, however painful, that allowed them to begin the long, arduous process of true grieving. They could now visit Jason's grave, knowing his resting place, a tangible connection to the son they had lost but never forgotten. The trial had forced them to relive the darkest period of their lives, but it also validated their unwavering belief that Jason's truth deserved to be told, his memory honored, and his killer held accountable. The silence that had once haunted them was now filled with the echo of justice. Jason Lee's story, though tragic, continues to cast a long and meaningful shadow over Lexington and beyond, serving as a powerful testament to the enduring power of hope and the relentless pursuit of justice. His disappearance galvanized the community, teaching them the importance of vigilance and solidarity. His eventual discovery and the conviction of his killer underscored the critical role of cold case investigations, reminding law enforcement agencies and the public that no case is ever truly closed as long as there is an unanswered question. Jason's legacy lives on in the hearts of his family, in the memories of his friends, and in the renewed commitment within the police department to re-examine forgotten files, to seek out new technologies, and to never give up on those who have been lost. He became a symbol, not just of a victim, but of the determination required to fight for the truth, no matter how long it takes. In the quiet aftermath of the trial, there was an emotional conclusion for everyone touched by Jason's story. The resilience of the human spirit, so vividly displayed by Evelyn and Robert Lee, became an inspiration. They had weathered unimaginable pain, yet emerged with their dignity intact, their love for Jason undimmed. Their journey was a poignant reminder that even in the face of the most profound loss, hope can endure, flickering even in the darkest moments, fueled by the conviction that justice, however delayed, is always worth fighting for. The relentless pursuit of that justice, by dedicated detectives and a community that refused to forget, showcased the best of humanity, a collective refusal to let an innocent life be taken in vain. It was a story not just of crime, but of enduring love, unwavering faith, and the ultimate triumph of right over wrong. The finality of the verdict allowed the Lees to finally breathe, to slowly, carefully, reconstruct a life forever altered, but now, finally, with a fragile peace. If you found Jason Lee's story compelling and appreciate the dedication required to bring such cold cases to light, please remember to subscribe to our channel. Give this video a like if you believe in the relentless pursuit of justice, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What aspect of Jason's story resonated most with you? Your engagement helps us continue to tell these important stories and shine a light on other cold cases awaiting resolution. Join us next time as we delve into another true crime mystery, exploring the depths of human behavior and the unwavering quest for truth.